Politics is becoming increasingly intertwined with football in a way that we cannot understand. I've just noticed the cat behind me, I'm going to keep rolling with it. In this video, I'm going to talk about the ways that various different countries try and use football as a political tool, why they do it, and ultimately what we can do to counter that and sort of move on with the world without having to sort of lean into politics being a fundamental part of football. First up, we have to discuss the massive shift in the culture of conflict, and it's the fact that military war isn't such a thing anymore and cultural war is increasingly an issue. You can look at Russia, for example, in the way that it hacks various countries' elections and things like that. It changes the fabric of the society rather than trying to bomb it. And one of the ways that it's happened as of late, and this is potentially what inspired me to make this video, is the recent Israel, Gaza, Palestine thing. I'm not going to delve into that because that is far too complex for this video. But the way that the FA made a statement that said that they sort of feel bad for the innocent civilians on both sides, and Israel came out and said that that wasn't a strong enough condemnation of the other side. Now, I feel like that is incredibly telling of the way that countries are trying to use football as a means of getting to the average person. So the average person supports its football club, they watch their country play, and they listen to what authority figures say. At the end of the day, football players are celebrities in the same way that an Instagram influencer is, and if a footballer says something, people will probably listen. I will get to that a little bit later. And this isn't a new thing either. The original state club is effectively Real Madrid. Spain, in the last century, spent a long time under Franco, who was effectively a fascist leader of the country and very much liked Real Madrid. Now, that was a way of both entertaining himself. He was a massive Real Madrid fan, so he looked after the club wherever he could. And that includes the biggest El Clasico win of all time. If I remember right, Barcelona won the first leg of a two-legged semi-final or final 4-1, and then apparently one of Franco's men went into the Barca dressing room at full time of the first leg and said, "Keep in mind you're playing football because we let you," and then coincidentally Barcelona lost the second leg, conceding 11 goals. That's the sort of thing that we are dealing with. It's a world in which major authority figures have always had the opportunity to exert their will over sports, and now they're just doing it in slightly subtler ways. So the modern day, I'm going to run through a bunch of different examples of the way that countries have sort of influenced football throughout buying clubs or hosting tournaments, anything like that. And the first country that came to mind when I was planning this video was Qatar. Now, Qatar quite obviously own a very, very big club, that being PSG, and they made moves for Manchester United. Manchester United didn't pay off, apparently. It looks like Sir Jim Ratcliffe is going to be buying a massive chunk of that club instead of the Qataris. But they still have a massive influence, the way that they are able to just throw money into PSG and keep them winning the league every single year. It's completely unchallenged. They've not won the Champions League yet, which is infinitely funny. But in terms of seizing competitions, the World Cup is the biggest trophy that they've got. Admittedly, they didn't do well in it, but it was a massive token for them. They were able to bring arguably the most sort of viewed competition on the planet every 4 years to their country. Was a massive win. They got lots of people in. Tourism was absolutely incredible, and they managed to sort of normalize their reputation around the world. I'll get into that in a little bit more detail later on, after we discuss the likes of Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, quite obviously, now own Newcastle United. We all know this. There was a big hullabaloo around it because of the cultural issues that Saudi Arabia deal with and the way that a bunch of Newcastle fans became immediately apologetic around that. And it's important to note that they are completely owned by the Saudi Arabian Public Investment Fund. I say completely, it's 80% with some minor investors, but 80% is an absolute controlling interest without any question, which is an arm of the government. That's different to the way that a bunch of other states own clubs, but Saudi Arabia directly owns Newcastle Football Club, without question, and you can increasingly see that Newcastle United having basically Saudi-themed away kits for the past few seasons is very, very telling of that influence. They've also got the Saudi Pro League to show for it, which is another massive part of the way that they're trying to influence football, basically buying some of the biggest talents in the world, shipping them over to Saudi Arabia and making them play in a league. That is probably not going to improve their national team, which didn't make it out of the group at the last World Cup, but it's a way of getting more eyes on Saudi Arabia and normalizing the state. And There's an argument that youth players might improve by being around these people, who knows? But it's a very astroturfy way of trying to build yourself a football culture rather than from the ground up, just sort of making a bunch of very, very pretty monuments to football from somewhere else rather than building your own. Another brilliant example of this is the way that they got Messi and Ronaldo as ambassadors and actively tried to win themselves. I think it was the 2030 World Cup at first. It's now looking like they will get the 2034 World Cup basically unchallenged after the 2031 managed to be held across 6 different countries on 3 continents or something daft like that. Um, but it's an active sign of they're getting people with lots and lots of influence on their side. I've just seen that the cat is asleep behind me. That is adorable. And continually pushing to take a bigger place on that world stage, and that includes 2 of the best players that have ever played the game. The UAE is another Eastern country that is actively playing a role in trying to sort of grab hold of football, and it's important to note that on the issue of City Football Group, which is the biggest incident of the UAE taking part in global football, it's not the state itself that owns the club, it's Sheikh Mansour. So, to define the difference, it's like if the United Kingdom didn't buy a football club, but Prince William did. Very, very close to the state itself owning the club, and it is effectively very, very similar, but it is an individual that has done that. A very rich individual, mind, but yeah. Aside from owning football clubs, there are a lot of very subtle influences that various states are trying to have over the world of football, the first of which is through sponsorships. Arsenal are some of the biggest examples of the way that these sponsorships work, the first of which is just look at their stadium name, the Emirates. It's it's a club that has always relied, since they moved into this new stadium, on money from the Middle East in order to keep the finances rolling. And as of late, they've also introduced the Visit Rwanda campaign, which is very, very beneficial for the country of Rwanda because now people associate Visit Rwanda with that weird country that is on the sleeve of Arsenal and other clubs like that, rather than something like the Rwandan genocide or deportation of migrants from the United Kingdom. Aside from that, there's also pre-season tours that play a massive role in the way that people view various countries, and Leeds United were a part of this problem. Leeds United took a trip to Myanmar. I think we played against the 11 best players in the Myanmar league and the Myanmar national team itself. Can't remember the results. I wasn't paying too much attention at the time, but it was under Heckingbottom, I think, something like that. And it's just a way for the country that is being visited to say, look, we've got a good reputation. Good football clubs are coming here. Maybe you want to in the future. China also has taken a very, very weird position in world football. In the past, it involved itself in sort of naturalization processes and signing players from all over the world, getting them to play in the Chinese Pro League for a set amount of time, and then basically changing their nationality under FIFA. It was a very clever way of doing things. Technically, it was within the rules, but China's changed the way that they're doing that. They're now focusing heavily on homegrown talents rather than going around the world. I think that's a better way of building up your country in terms of football, but it doesn't really do anything for the sports washing side of things like we see with the Middle Eastern countries. China needs quite a lot of sports washing. Even the Beijing Olympics haven't quite undone the Uyghur genocide and issues such as that. So, what do countries have to gain from all of this? The first thing they have to gain is normalization. The vast majority of these countries have like issues such as crimes against humanity and massive government corruption or genocides in their history that they want normalized. They want people to not associate their countries with these issues. They want them to associate them with football and happiness and your hobbies and things like that. And it clearly works. A lot of Newcastle fans clearly look at Saudi Arabia and go, "You've saved our football club," rather than the murder of journalists, which not ideal, to be honest, especially when groups such as Newcastle's LGBT supporters club were in favor of being bought out by Saudi Arabia when, if I remember rightly, in Saudi Arabia, if you are gay, that is worthy of the death penalty. It also brings a level of soft power. So, again, consider the Saudi Arabia example. Now they own Newcastle United, they can invest in local communities in Newcastle and things like that and improve their image. But that also means they get a little bit more sway with local councils, local governments. They are active stakeholders in that area now, and the government needs to listen to them the same way they would any other big companies in the region. Furthermore, you have the issues of the unquestioned support. I've been through that with the Saudi Arabia stuff, and it massively adjusts the associations that people have with these countries. As the World Cup was going on, people stopped associating Qatar with unpaid migrant workers and instead transitioned to they've held a decent World Cup where Messi won. That massive shift over time is quite damaging for, I think, the fabric of football itself and the fabric of global politics, because it means that countries that do pretty horrendous things, like on the Myanmar thing, I think it was Myanmar that featured the Rohingya genocide. In these countries, you've got massive incidents that are constantly ongoing that people just forget about because they associate with the football instead. And when you think world politics, you don't immediately go to all the little itty bitty events over the years. You have one solid view of what that country is and what that country does. When you think America, you're not going to think of every single event that's happened in America's history. You're going to think very, very recent. You're thinking Super Bowl. When you think China, you think Beijing Olympics. And it's these big spectacles and the fact that they're able to turn football clubs into those spectacles that is severely damaging. So what can we do? In essence, what we can do is we can look beyond the propaganda a lot of the time, because that's what owning a football club is to a lot of these places. It's a PR exercise. It's nothing beyond this will improve our reputation. Yeah, they've invested a lot into Newcastle in the Saudi Arabia case. Yeah, they've improved Man City in the UAE case. Yeah, Qatar held a decent enough World Cup, I suppose, but that doesn't cover up for various crimes in the background that they're trying to get you to forget. If you keep on top of what has happened in the past and you keep holding countries to account rather than saying, this did happen in the past, but now you own a football club, things are going to be a lot better on all sides, and we can get a far less toxic version of politics in football where we all pay attention to issues such as safe standing and having a pint on the concourse rather than various wars, genocides, and human rights issues. Anyway, that was a little bit longer than I was aiming for, and yeah, let me know what you think in the comments below. Like the video if you enjoyed, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.